Stella Peters always believed her beauty deserved more than a one-room apartment tucked behind a butcher's stall in Warri Market. She wasn't a bad woman, not at first, just exhausted, angry, and convinced poverty was an insult life shouldn't have thrown at her. Inside that cramped home, 12-year-old Virginia watched her parents argue louder than they prayed. Pots boiled with empty promises. Debt sat at the table like a third child. Chibuike had once been a proud businessman, until life squeezed him dry. Machines broke, clients vanished, and a good man slowly folded into himself. And Stella? She sharpened her frustrations into a weapon and aimed it at him. Virginia found small joy in school plays, her talent bright, her smile soft like her mother's once was. But talent doesn't pay rent, and beauty doesn't feed a family. One humid night, everything changed. Stella returned home smelling of a perfume they couldn't afford, carrying groceries they definitely couldn't afford. She didn't explain. Virginia already understood. Days later, Virginia heard her whisper into the phone, begging, a man's name repeated over and over, Ken Nwobi. After that, Ken's presence filled the house without ever living there. Bags of rice, bundles of money, a new phone, a new wig, bills suddenly paid. Virginia's school fees magically cleared. Stella's dependence became obedience. And Ken smiled. When Chibuike attempted to confront her, there was no shouting, just Stella's cold eyes and Ken's quiet sentence. You should focus on yourself. Let me take care of your family. That was the moment everything shifted. From that day, the Peters family no longer belonged to themselves. They belonged to Ken. Poverty teaches gratitude, but it can also teach obedience. By the time Virginia turned 15, the Peters home was unrecognizable, not from misfortune alone, but from who they allowed to define it. Chibuike Peters had once built stability with his own hands. Now he fought for daily survival while watching his family slip into dependence. Stella saw it differently. Where her husband saw struggle, she saw embarrassment. Where he wanted patience, she wanted escape. And escape came in the form of Ken Nwobi. At first he offered help, school fees, groceries, bills, small gestures that seemed harmless. But Stella noticed the power behind the kindness. Slowly, every decision became Ken's decision. Stella obeyed without hesitation. She stopped her small business, moved neighborhoods, called Ken for advice on everything. Dependence became obedience. Chibuike tried to resist, but Ken didn't need to shout. He didn't need to demand. His wealth and calm authority did the work for him. Jobs vanished. Loans disappeared. The father of the house became invisible. And Stella drank it all in, repeating Ken's words as her own. Your father doesn't know how to give us a better life. Men need power, not excuses. Ken is the only one who truly wants to help us. Virginia watched silently. Her parents divided between weakness and strength, between sinking and shining. One rainy night, Chibuike tried to comfort Stella, but she pushed him away. Ken is more useful to this family than you, she whispered. And in that moment, Ken Nwobi, calm, calculated, commanding, quietly claimed a family that didn't even realize they were already his. By 17, Virginia had learned that birthdays in the Peters home were not celebrations. They were reminders. Reminders that dreams were expensive. Reminders that survival was the only gift her family could afford. On her 17th birthday, there was no cake, no music, no laughter. Just her mother arguing with debt collectors outside the window, and her father sitting shirtless on a torn sofa, staring into a darkness he couldn't escape. Virginia had grown into a gentle beauty, the kind people said was destined for Nollywood. But destiny means nothing when poverty is louder. Stella looked at her daughter with pride and with hunger. She didn't just see a child, she saw a ladder. Meanwhile, Chief Ken Nwobo had woven himself deeper into their lives. No longer a helper, he had become the family's oxygen tank. Every meal, every bill, every problem, Ken paid for it. Virginia believed it was kindness. He sponsored her acting classes, bought her clothes for auditions, encouraged her dreams with a mentor's voice. Dream big, he would say. The world will remember your face. She admired him then, not with desire, but with the gratitude of a girl who thought someone finally believed in her. But behind every gift, Ken was building ownership. Behind every compliment, he was planting control. And Stella watered those seeds. Go and greet him properly, she whispered. Dress well, speak well. This man can change our lives. Whenever Virginia hesitated, her mother's voice cut her down. You want to end up like your father, broke and begging for work? Those words stabbed deeper than any shout. Chibuike saw everything. He watched from the corners of the house as his wife and daughter orbited around another man. He watched his authority shrink until he became a ghost, visible but powerless. One night he gathered the courage that life had not yet stolen from him. He walked into the living room where Ken sat like royalty, wine in hand, Stella serving him with the devotion of a wife. Chibuike's voice trembled as he spoke, but the truth inside it was steady. He accused Ken of tearing the family apart, of owning what wasn't his. Stella exploded. Years of anger, fear, and ambition poured out of her in one volcanic moment. The neighbors heard everything, and this time, even the walls felt the finality in her voice. Humiliated, heartbroken, and defeated, Chibuike picked up his worn-out bag. Virginia ran after him, desperate, crying, begging him not to go. He looked at his daughter, the one thing he loved more than life, and whispered the words that shattered her heart. They've already sold you. You just don't know the price yet. Then he walked into the night. Not because he wanted to, but because no one in that house could still hear him. Virginia collapsed to her knees. Stella shut the door without blinking. And Ken, calm, patient, victorious, leaned back in his seat. The last obstacle to his plan had walked away on its own. Stella Peters never planned to sell her daughter, but poverty has a way of turning intentions into opportunities, and opportunities into sins. When Chief Ken Nwobo decided he wanted Virginia, there was no hesitation in his 67-year-old heart. No guilt, no fear, just triumph. The quiet triumph of a man who believes money is permission. For years, Stella had been preparing the ground without realizing it. Every secret she confided in him, every problem she carried to his front door, every insult she threw at her own husband, Ken studied it all like a patient hunter. So when he finally said the words, "Stella, I want Virginia," she didn't shout. She didn't gasp. She didn't even flinch. She asked him a question only a desperate mother could ask. What exactly are you offering? And Ken offered everything. A new house, a monthly allowance, business sponsorship, protection, status, freedom from the humiliation of poverty. For Stella, it wasn't a proposal. It was a breakthrough. And for Virginia, 17 years old, already touched by the light of Nollywood, already dreaming of escaping the life she was born into, the promise was intoxicating, luxury, travel, opportunity, security. Her mother told her it was the only way out. Her father was the only one who protested. Chibuike burst into the living room one night, voice trembling, legs shaking, fighting for the last thing he still believed he owned, his daughter's life. This man is not our savior. He is tearing this family apart. But Stella silenced him with a sentence sharper than a knife. You lost your right to speak the day you lost your ability to provide. And Virginia, the little girl who once ran to him for comfort, now stared at him with the eyes of a teenager raised by hunger. A child, she whispered. I was a child when hunger taught me adulthood. That was the moment he broke, not because he was wrong, but because he realized he was already defeated. He walked out of the house that night, not because he wanted to, but because no one inside could hear him anymore. Preparations for the wedding move fast. Money erases shame. Money silences neighbors. Money paints an old groom in gold and calls him respectable. On the wedding day, Virginia stood in front of the mirror wearing a dress she did not choose, a smile she could not find, and a future she could not escape. Stella glowed with pride. Ken glowed with victory. And Chibuike stood outside the venue, hidden behind a pillar, crying silently, because poor men in Nigeria are not allowed to make noise. This was never a wedding. It was a transaction, written by a greedy mother, funded by a powerful man, and signed with the tears of a helpless father. Virginia Peters was barely 20, but in reality, she was still the frightened 17-year-old girl forced into a marriage she never asked for, living in a mansion that felt more like a golden prison than a home. Her days were wrapped in luxury, designer shoes, gold bracelets, Italian handbags worth more than her father ever earned in a year. She attended political events, charity galas, ribbon cuttings, smiling on command as cameras flashed like she was born for this life. But luxury is a strange mask. It hides pain, but it also suffocates. Because every night, when the mansion went quiet and the older wives retreated into their heavily perfumed rooms, Virginia would escape into Lagos, into neon lights, wild music, and rooftop parties that made her forget she was a man's fourth wife. Clubs welcomed her like a lost child. Strangers held her like she wasn't somebody's bride. And every video, every picture, every blurry clip of her dancing on tables spread across the internet like dry season fire. The blogs feasted. Slay queen, wife of billionaire. Is she a bride or a disaster waiting to happen? The mansion erupted. The older wives blamed everyone, the guards, the housekeeper, even the chef, for not watching the girl properly. But eventually their fury found a target. Ken, and Ken summoned her. He sat at the head of the long dining table, surrounded by cold luxury and quiet anger. Virginia walked in late, wearing slippers and ripped jeans, scrolling her phone like the meeting meant nothing. The wives attacked her first, her clothes, her behavior, her youth. But Virginia finally broke. She stood, trembling with years of buried truth. It's my body you all judge, she whispered. My youth you traded. My freedom you sold. I didn't ask for this marriage. Your money forced it. And for once, the wives saw it. Not a rebellious girl, but a child who had never been allowed to grow. Virginia ran from the mansion that night into the rain-soaked streets of Lagos, searching for air, for space, for a version of herself that still belonged to her. She hid in short-let apartments, drowned her pain in loud music, and force laughter around friends who didn't know she was falling apart. But the world is small, and scandals travel fast. A blurry video, Virginia on a hotel balcony at 2 a.m., someone's hand around her waist, music blasting in the background, exploded online. Politicians used it to attack Ken. Business partners whispered. Contracts froze. And that night Ken stormed into her room, eyes burning with fury and humiliation. "You will destroy everything I built," he roared. Virginia screamed back, voice cracking, heart breaking. "I never asked to be your wife. I was a child trying not to starve." And the truth thundered through the mansion walls. You can force a girl into a wedding gown, but you cannot force her youth to disappear. Ken Nwobo always believed that fear was stronger than loyalty, and for a long time, he was right. People obeyed him, respected him, bowed to him, but fear has one weakness. It disappears the moment you stumble, and Ken stumbled. It started with a headline, then another. Contracts exposed, documents leaked, enemies resurfacing like ghosts hungry for revenge. Suddenly, the phones in his mansion never stopped ringing, but there was no respect on the other end. Only accusations, threats, demands. Ken barked orders, fired staff, broke things, blamed the world. But the empire he built on fear was already sinking. Virginia didn't help. She was falling apart faster than gossip could spread. Nightclubs in Abuja, rooftop madness in Lagos, faces she didn't know, drinks she didn't need, videos everywhere. Her laughing too loudly, dancing too wildly, running from a life she never chose. The bloggers accused her of refusing to grow up, but nobody asked why she was hurting. The older wives were furious. "This girl will ruin us. Tell her to sit at home." But Virginia couldn't hear them. Her loneliness was louder than their anger. Then one night, she collapsed in a hotel room, unconscious, exhausted, barely breathing. The video didn't go online, but the rumors spread like wildfire. Ken stormed into the hospital demanding answers, demanding silence, trying to control a storm that no longer feared him. And while he fought his battles, Stella was losing hers. Chibuike, tired, humiliated, broken, finally walked away. No drama, no shouting, just a simple sentence. "I am done being insulted." And for the first time, the world agreed with him. Stella's friends disappeared. Her dreams evaporated. Her body, worn down by stress and regret, gave up quietly one morning. She didn't wake up. Her loud ambition ended in a silence no one celebrated. And then Ken's empire collapsed completely. Financial crimes exposed, government agencies moving in, properties seized, accounts frozen, reputation destroyed. He called an emergency meeting. 40 people invited. Only 3 showed up. As he paced, shouting, sweating, his chest tightened. The room tilted, and the man who once commanded nations was brought to his knees by his own heart. And the wives. Wife 1 fled to London with jewelry. Wife 2 disappeared into Dubai with stolen funds. Wife 3 took her children and vanished to Ghana. Not one stayed long enough to close the door behind them. Virginia was sent to rehab, emotionally shattered, physically exhausted, finally still long enough to look in the mirror and meet the girl she had been running from. And Chibuike, the man everyone called weak, lived quietly, peacefully, tending a small farm, drinking cold water from a clay pot, breathing freely for the first time in decades. Because when greed builds a kingdom, it always collapses on the people who live inside it. Ken rose to escape shame. Stella chased wealth to escape poverty. Virginia ran from fear toward comfort. And the only one who survived the storm was the man who chased nothing at all.